Skill acquisition requires an appropriately timed response to the detection of important information through effective interactions with the environment. The constraints-led approach has proven to be excellent in regards to skill acquisition and development, as opposed to the traditional approach, which specifically outlines the incorporation of explicitly isolated movement patterns from the performance environment. The CLA is underpinned by Newell's triadic formula, which details the interaction of environmental, individual, and the task constraints to produce an emergent skill or behaviour.
There is no denying that developing adequate technique in sports is inherently connected to experiencing success. This is particularly accurate within swimming, as it is a sport that depends heavily on technique to efficiently move through the water. Today I will be observing a young triathlete named Kate from the QUT Triathlon squad as she works with myself and assistant coach Karla. I am the head coach of the QUT Triathlon squad, and here at QUT we use biomechanics as a theoretical framework and the constraints-led approach as a preferred pedagogy when assisting triathletes in skill acquisition and development. Okay, you've been training with us at QUT for about 10 months. How's everything going?
Yeah, it's not going too bad. My cycling and my running is pretty competitive, but it's my swimming that's the problem. So, for example, in a race, when I come out of the water, I'm just so far behind the other girls that I can't catch up to them in the cycling and the running. So, my swimming really needs some work.
I've noticed your progression is going really well. However, your swimming is definitely keeping you back. What's your outcome goal for your next race?
So my next race, I'd probably really like to get a medal or top 5. I feel like I could reach that if I just get a little bit faster in the water.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Should we have a look at your technique in the water?
Yeah.
As a freestyle specialist, I am trying to observe Kate's technique to identify exactly what is slowing her down in the water. The first sign of the problem is that Kate's hips are snaking through the water when practicing freestyle, therefore creating extra drag, which is contributing to a decreased speed. Her hips snaking through the water shows that she is not rotating her whole body along the longitudinal axis, which is ideal in freestyle in order to remain in a streamlined position. Being streamlined in the water means that the flow you are creating through the water, the laminar flow, is not disrupted. The pool water moves around the body in uniform layers of differing speeds, and if the shape of your body were to change abruptly, the layers of the water would separate and cause a turbulent flow. Achieving laminar flow through maintaining a smooth, streamlined position throughout freestyle is a faster, more efficient way to move through the water. We first need to identify where her body is not rotating efficiently or maintaining a streamlined position and instead snaking, which is really the body trying to regain balance in the water. You can see that the problem is originating in how Kate is beginning her stroke in the entry phase.
During the entry phase, you want to begin by flexing the elbow. The elbow should be superior to the hand during this phase. The hand should be anterior to the shoulder with the fingers adducted completely. The fingertips should enter first with the thumb down and the arm internally rotated. The arm should slide anteriorly until it reaches maximum extension directly in front of the shoulder. This is important because when you overreach, you can see your hips sway to the side, and this is exactly what happens in the water. You can see that Kate is overreaching or crossing over her midline in the entry phase, and as Newton's law of motion states, every action has an opposite and equal reaction. Therefore, her hips snaking to the side is a reaction to the crossover. The catch phase begins as soon as the arm is fully extended in front of the shoulder during the entry phase. During the catch phase, the elbow has to flex and the shoulder must internally rotate in order for the fingers to point downwards towards the bottom of the pool. At this point, the hand is used to begin propelling the body forward, ensuring the fingers are not abducting, as this does not allow for proper catching of the water. Because Kate has overreached in her entry phase, she has not reached full extension of the arm, and therefore her body is not in the streamlined position which is needed to achieve laminar flow. Instead, she has created a turbulent flow of water around her as she moved into the catch phase. The pull phase begins usually halfway through the catch phase, and from this phase the swimmer can gain a lot of speed. During the pull, the hand, forearm and arm pull the water that's caught from the catch phase and move posteriorly past the shoulder. During this phase, the elbow remains flexed until it passes the shoulder and then begins to extend as it moves on to the next phase. The follow-through phase begins as soon as the flexed elbow passes the shoulder during the pull phase. Once the elbow moves posteriorly past the shoulder, the elbow begins to extend until it is parallel to the thigh. At the end of this phase, the arm should be fully extended, close to the side of the swimmer. A good indication of a successful follow-through is when the thumb hits the top of the thighs. According to Newton's law of motion, the propulsive force exerted by the swimmer on the water is equal to the drag force exerted by the surrounding water on the swimmer when moving at any constant velocity. Consequently, the maximum velocity the swimmer can attain is achieved when their maximum propelling force is in equilibrium, a state in which the opposing forces are balanced, with the drag opposing the forward movement. To enable Kate to swim faster, she must either increase the propulsive force, reduce the drag force, or do both. Kate is first attempting to gain maximum forward propulsion during her catch, pull, follow-through phases. However, because of the crossover entry, the propulsive force from her underwater crossover generates less power. This is because less water is caught to help with the forward propulsion, resulting in more resistance in a larger body of water that her body must swim through. This underwater crossover has also generated eccentric torque, which is the force applied either side of her centre of gravity. Off-centre or eccentric torque can be used to produce rotation in an object, and in this case, the rotation in Kate's body is causing her body to twist and hips to snake. As already mentioned, the snaking of the hips is not ideal in the water, as we want a streamlined position, and the hip snaking is reducing speed through the water by creating more drag resistance than necessary. The active drag has resulted in unbalanced forces, as the drag force is now greater than the force exerted from the crossover forward propulsion. As a result, Kate's overall distance per stroke is decreased, therefore taking her longer to cover distances in the water. The recovery phase begins as soon as the arm is completely extended to the swimmer's side. The swimmer must hyperextend the shoulder at the glenohumeral joint and slightly externally rotate in order to allow arm position itself to exit the water. Once the arm externally rotates, you want to let momentum guide your arm out of the water, where you will flex at the elbow again to begin the entry phase.
It may sound as though the stroke is a series of separate motions, but each phase is actually a consecutive part of one overall motion, and we call this summation of forces. Newton's law of levers states that the law is the product of force, and force arm is equal to the product of the resistance. The components of a lever include the axis of rotation, or the fulcrum, resistance, load or weight, and the force or effort. In freestyle, the arm muscle provides the force, the shoulder is the axis of rotation, and the water is the resistance, which comes from the arm during the stroke, altogether making it a class 3 lever, as most in the human body are. Each movement of the freestyle stroke needs to be optimized to increase velocity. This involves exercising control over the degrees of freedom through each phase. For example, during the entry phase, to produce the ideal streamlined position, we want the axis of rotation, the shoulder in this case, to freeze so the arm can extend straight in front of the swimmer in line with their shoulder. As we move into the catch phase, the rotation at the shoulder is frozen and the degrees of freedom are then released in the elbow joint as the arm flexes to catch water. The elbow joint is now the fulcrum with the force in the forearm and hand, and the resistance is still the water. As the catch phase smoothly transitions into the pull phase, the elbow joint freezes in a slightly flexed position with fingers pointing down, and the shoulder joint is released as it becomes the fulcrum once again.
This is a demonstration of two Class 3 levers working in sequence for the summation of forces to produce maximum velocity. Velocity in the water is directly related to optimised use of levers, and we want Kate to increase her distance per stroke so her levers are utilised in the most efficient way possible for her as an individual.
Kate is currently at stage 2 of Newell's model of motor learning because she's trying to gain control of a coordinated structure. The relationship among body parts and basic coordination of the task, freestyle swimming, has been established, allowing her to complete swim legs of triathlons. The challenge is now refining her movement pattern and becoming more efficient at managing her degrees of freedom. This stage of her learning will be characterised by probation of her existing attractor stability in order to discover motor patterns to improve the functionality of the behaviour. Alright, Kate, can you come over here for a sec? Let's have a quick chat. So I've noticed, I've just been watching you swim, you're starting to overreach. Okay, so your arms are crossing over each other, which isn't really ideal. So I've got a task for you. So just hold the board in one hand. So do 3 strokes on one side and then 3 strokes on the other, and we'll see how that goes.
Okay.
I watch Kate as she switches her working arm each 50-metre length and notice that over time, Kate is hitting the side of the kickboard less and less, and instead her hand is entering the water to the side, consequently more in line with her shoulder. This is known as self-organisation under constraint manipulation. An external focus of attention of concentrating on not hitting the side of the kickboard allows for a new movement pattern to emerge naturally without the need for explicit verbal instructions or demonstration. The coach also notices Kate's placement of her hand on the side of the kickboard has caused the emergent behaviour of an extension beyond the direct shoulder line, due to the width of the kickboard being larger than her petite shoulder frame.
So how was that? That was pretty good. I just have a slight adjustment for you. So instead of holding the board on the side, I would like to start holding it in the middle, and we'll see how that goes. Okay.
Instead of providing augmented feedback on the hand position, she asks her to place the hand holding the kickboard in the centre. The behaviour that emerges from this constraint adjustment is her hand entering the water in direct line from her shoulder and following through alongside the body, which is ideal for maximum catch and propulsion. This is an example of how both organismic and task constraints from Newell's triadic formula interact simultaneously to produce an emergent behaviour. The underwater crossover is also eliminated as her body adapts to the new movement pattern, and the force is applied against the water resistance in line with her centre of mass, right down the side of her body. Her hips are also no longer snaking, showing that eccentric torque is decreased. As Kate swims her 50-metre lengths with the kickboard, it is apparent that her body has successfully self-organised around the constraint, and her crossover is no longer a problem, as the new movement pattern takes over. This is an example of decay. It is important to note that decay refers to the constraint no longer constraining because the swimmer has overcome the problem, not decaying of an athlete's skill.
Alright, well done. We're just going to try something else now. We're going to try some catcher. Okay, so just keep your hand, one hand out in front and catch your hands together after every arm. Okay, and we'll see how that goes. Okay.
I decide to remove the kickboard and have Kate practice without anything obstructing her hands and while alternating working arms. The swim drill is known as catch-up, as both hands meet directly out in front before one will continue into the freestyle catch, while the other stays long and straight. In this constraint, Kate is taught when to freeze her degrees of freedom, one arm isolated in front, in order to enhance her distance per stroke as well as her rotation along the longitudinal axis. This task constraint better represents the performance environment than using a kickboard, which is an essential principle of CLA. Again, the body experiences instability under a new constraint and is required to self-organize and adapt a new movement pattern. I am pleased as with each stroke I can observe the new behaviour emerging. The catch-up stroke is helping Kate's overall streamlined position in the water as it becomes long and straight, enhancing the laminar flow, as well as developing a nice rotation along the longitudinal axis. She lengthens out and catches up her hands to each other.
Alright, Kate, everything's looking really good. How's the session going?
It's going well.
Alright, now I want you to forget about these tasks that we just tried. I want you getting back into normal freestyle.
Okay.
So, let's go to the end of the pool. I want you to count as many strokes as you can. I want you to try and increase your distance per stroke. How does that sound?
Yeah, that's
Good.
good.
See you down the other end.
Because Kate has grown adept at exploiting the constraints applied, I want to take it a step further and release the degrees of freedom to transfer the new movement pattern and skills acquired to the performance environment. I want to control the parameters and build on the stroke length to help Kate keep that long, straight body alignment through the water. At this point, Kate is entering stage 3 of Mueller's model of motor learning because she is now attempting to optimize control of her coordinated freestyle structure to enhance efficiency through the water. On her first 50-metre length swimming regular freestyle, she counts her strokes per length. I aim to use minimum augmented feedback, which is a key element of the CLA, to provide her with an external focus of decreasing the number of strokes in each 50-metre length. The behaviour that emerges under this constraint is an even longer, straighter body position that glides through the water and stronger propulsion from the catch. Kate's hands are entering almost directly in line with her shoulder as she is maintaining balance in the water with good rotation through the body. She has achieved metastability by being able to shift attractor states efficiently in response to the instability the environmental constraints and the task constraints create around her.
Alright, Kate, that's looking really good. How many strokes you get?
I got 52.
52, alright. That's great. Let's see if we can decrease it. I'll meet you down the other end.
Okay.
Let me know your new score.
When given the chance, the body will self-organise under constraints to produce a functional, coordinated movement solution to best suit the individual task and environment. In this case study, Kate was able to acquire and develop skills almost subconsciously as both myself and Coach Karla implemented appropriate constraints. This hands-off approach allows an individual a choice in how they respond depending on their own organismic constraints. Additionally, Kate can become a better learner as she has the freedom to perceive the information around her and determine the most efficient way to respond.
Alright, how many was that?
Yeah, I got 49.
Yes, Kate. Nice work. Alright, good session. Go get changed, get warm, and I'll meet you over there for a chat.
Okay.
So, Kate, how'd you find the session today?
Yeah, it was really good. I definitely learned a lot about my stroke.
Okay, awesome. So over the next 6 weeks or so, we're going to use these tasks that we practiced today to achieve your performance goal, which is to lengthen your distance per stroke.
Yeah.
And obviously those tasks that we just practiced, they're your process goals to achieve that end result. So how does that sound?
Yeah, good. So I'm going to work on definitely getting my stroke count down per 50-metre lap.
Yeah. Alright, well I'll see you next training.
Okay, I'll see you then.
The interaction between Kate and myself focuses on the successful achievement of the athlete's outcome goal. By identifying the performance goal of lengthening her distance per stroke, Kate will be more intrinsically motivated to work on her process goals as she aims to better her performance in order to hopefully medal at her next triathlon.
Where's my time?
Right, well let's keep trying and let's get another piece.